The excavator bucket was already hooked beneath my cedar mailbox when I stepped into the driveway and raised my phone. Fresh dirt lay across the grass, and 6 identical black mailbox posts waited on a flatbed behind the crew. HOA President Elaine Porter stood beside them with a clipboard, telling the foreman to remove mine first because I had refused to pay the replacement fee. "Every home complies today," she said. I did not argue. I photographed the truck number, the marked utility lines, and the page of her work order that authorized removal of all non-standard units. Then I handed the foreman the yellowed agreement I had signed when I bought the house 23 years earlier. It identified each original roadside mailbox as an owner-maintained fixture and required the affected owner's written consent before the association could replace or charge for it. The foreman read the paragraph twice, lowered the bucket, and called his office. Elaine's confident expression disappeared when his supervisor ordered the entire crew to stop. But the project was bigger than 6 posts. The invoice clipped beneath Elaine's work order showed that 214 homeowners had already been charged, and the contractor's name matched a company listed on the HOA treasurer's financial disclosure. My name is Mark Ellison. I was 58 then, and I made my living repairing other people's houses around Juniper Ridge. I understood what careless equipment could do to buried cable, irrigation pipe, and concrete. That was one reason I kept filming instead of stepping between the excavator and the post. The other was the small star carved beneath the mailbox shelf. My daughter Hannah had cut it there with a pocket knife when she was 10, then blamed the crooked points on the wood grain. I had sanded around it every spring for 23 years. Across the street, Ruth Calder stood beside her walker with an insulated pharmacy envelope tucked under one arm. She was 72 and timed her mornings around the mail carrier because one of her prescriptions could not sit long in the heat. When she saw the open holes farther down the curb, she asked whether delivery would still reach her house. Elaine answered before I could, "The upgrade will be finished by Friday." Ruth looked at the excavator, then at the envelope. Friday was 3 days away. Leon Briggs, the foreman, folded my agreement along its existing crease and returned it carefully. He told Elaine that Northline Streetscape would not touch my post until its office reviewed the document. She closed her clipboard hard enough to bend the corner of the work order, but she did not order him to continue. I photographed the invoice while it was still visible. The total project charge was divided across every property at $685 each. Beneath Northline's name was an internal reference number identical to one I remembered seeing beside Treasurer Victor Shaw's conflict disclosure in the previous year's meeting packet. The excavator backed away from my mailbox. Then Leon pointed down Juniper Lane, where fresh orange marks continued past Ruth's house and around the bend. His revised instruction covered only my address. The other 213 homes were still on the schedule. I had stopped one machine for one morning, but I had not stopped the project, or the people who had sent it. By noon, Northline's flatbed had left Juniper Lane, but orange paint still marked the grass in front of every house. Elaine sent a neighborhood email calling the pause at my address a temporary document review. She made it sound administrative, as if my mailbox had failed an inspection. Attached was the same $685 charge, due within 15 days, followed by a warning that unpaid balances could lead to collection costs and continuing violation penalties. To understand why that notice bothered me, you had to understand how Juniper Ridge had grown. When Susan and I moved there 23 years earlier, it was 18 houses surrounded by scraped lots, young maples, and construction trailers. Those first homes became Phase 1. 2 later phases curved beyond the original loop and eventually brought the community to 214 properties. The developer had not supplied mailboxes for the first 18 homes. Instead, each buyer received a mailbox maintenance and fixture agreement at closing. It listed placement dimensions, required owners to keep the posts safe and serviceable, and described them as privately maintained fixtures. The developer and the original HOA signed the exhibit too. Most important, the association could not replace an owner's mailbox or charge that owner for replacement without written consent. Hannah was 10 when we built ours. She held the level backward, dropped half the screws in the grass, and insisted that cedar looked better than the metal posts in the builder's catalog. Susan brought lemonade outside and wrote the measurements on the back of a grocery receipt because neither Hannah nor I could find a pencil. It was an ordinary Saturday, the kind no one recognizes as a family landmark until years have passed. Susan was the reason I could place the agreement in Leon's hands that morning. She kept our closing papers in a blue binder labeled House, Do Not Throw Away, moving it through 3 kitchen renovations without losing a page. That evening, we spread the binder across the dining table, while Hannah joined us by video call. Keep the mailbox if the paper protects it, Hannah said, but don't let a piece of wood take over your life. She was not dismissing what we had built. She knew I could turn a repair into a personal test of endurance. I promised her I would follow the documents, not my temper. The difficulty was that Juniper Ridge no longer operated under only its original papers. The HOA had adopted restated declarations 12 years earlier and revised its architectural standards twice. Elaine's formal response arrived the next morning. She argued that those later documents gave the board authority to require uniform exterior fixtures and had superseded any inconsistent private arrangement. I read the restated declaration slowly, making notes on a legal pad. It allowed the architectural committee to review visible improvements. It also authorized the HOA to maintain listed common property, but I could not find roadside mailboxes on that list, and none of the amendments mentioned the old mailbox agreement by name, exhibit number, or recording reference. Several neighbors came by after work. Some liked the black replacements. Others thought $685 was excessive, but had already paid because Elaine's notice looked final. Ruth brought her copy folded inside a supermarket circular. She had written 3 columns beside the charge: groceries, fuel, and prescriptions. Paying the HOA meant reducing all 3 for the month. One couple showed me a credit card receipt because their checking account was already committed to daycare. Another homeowner admitted he had paid before reading the attachment because the red final notice banner frightened his wife. Nobody had been shown meeting minutes, competing bids, or a ballot. They had been shown a deadline. That changed the way I looked at the dispute. I still wanted the cedar post left alone, but my preference was not enough to protect 213 other households. If Elaine was right, my agreement might cover only the 18 original homes. If she was wrong, the board had used the appearance of authority to collect nearly $147,000 without showing anyone the vote or provision that allowed it. Susan and I searched the county's online index for every declaration and amendment recorded against Juniper Ridge. We found the original agreement. We found the restated declaration. What we did not find was any document connecting the two, or terminating the owner's consent rights. The absence was not proof by itself. It was, however, a reason to ask someone who knew exactly what should have been there. The person I called was Maya Chen, a real estate attorney whose office occupied 2 rooms above a hardware store 12 miles from Juniper Ridge. I knew her through a customer whose retaining wall dispute she had settled without turning 2 neighbors into lifelong enemies. That mattered to me. I wanted someone who understood documents but did not treat every disagreement as a reason to perform outrage. Maya placed my yellowed agreement beside Elaine's letter and read both without speaking. When she finished, she did not tell me I had won. "This is useful," she said. Useful is not the same as self-enforcing. Her refusal to promise victory unsettled me, but it made me trust her. She marked the strongest paragraph in green and uncertain language in yellow. By the end of the meeting, the yellow sections outnumbered the green ones, and she left everyone visible. My copy showed what the parties intended in Phase 1, but Maya needed to know whether it had been recorded, whether later instruments addressed it, and whether the HOA had followed its current governing documents. A private paper in my kitchen binder could stop a cautious contractor. It could not, by itself, settle the rights of 214 properties. Her initial retainer equaled what I normally earned from 2 bathroom repairs. I sat in her parking lot afterward with the agreement on the passenger seat and checked my business account on my phone. 2 customers were late paying invoices. My work van had begun slipping between 2nd and 3rd gear. For 10 minutes, I considered taking Elaine's offer of a temporary exemption and letting everyone else decide whether to fight. Then Ruth texted me a photograph of an orange mark beside her mailbox. I transferred the retainer before I drove home. Maya began with the county recorder, rather than the HOA's online portal. 3 days later, we received a certified copy of the Mailbox Maintenance and Fixture Agreement. The exhibit number, property description, and signatures matched my original. It had been executed by the developer, the first HOA president, and the 18 Phase 1 owners, then cross-referenced in the first set of deeds. That did not automatically extend its consent protection to the later phases. It did establish that Elaine could not dismiss it as a dead piece of paper merely because the board preferred a uniform design. Hannah helped me build a digital index of every document. She named the files by date and type, while I scanned pages crooked, upside down, or twice. I had taught her to read a tape measure when she was a child. Now she taught me how to make searchable files and quietly rescan the pages I had blurred without making me feel incompetent. The recorded chain contained the original declaration, 3 phase supplements, the restated declaration, and 2 architectural amendments. None released the mailbox agreement. None converted the Phase 1 roadside fixtures into common property. The architectural language was broad enough to let the HOA review replacement designs, but Maya found no clause plainly authorizing the board to seize an owner's existing fixture and bill that owner for a substitute. The community-wide charge raised a separate issue. Juniper Ridge's bylaws allowed the board to approve ordinary operating expenses, but a special capital assessment above a stated annual threshold required approval from 2/3 of the voting membership. The mailbox program exceeded that threshold. Meeting minutes showed that Elaine, Victor Shaw, and one other director had approved the contract in a 3-2 board vote. There was no membership ballot, consent tally, or notice of an assessment vote. Maya cautioned me again. Missing material from the portal did not prove a vote had never happened. We requested the official ballot records, notices, proxies, vendor bids, and unredacted minutes directly from the association. We also contacted the local delivery operations office. Its correspondence showed that the HOA had asked about height and setback measurements for individual boxes. The office had answered those technical questions, but the file contained no approved conversion of the neighborhood's delivery arrangement and no instruction requiring uniform posts. The HOA had taken limited placement guidance and presented the project to homeowners as if an outside authority required the entire upgrade. Maya assembled the evidence into 3 separate tracks. The recorded agreement protected the first 18 properties. The bylaws controlled whether all 214 owners could be charged. The delivery correspondence tested Elaine's claim that the design was necessary rather than preferred. No single track decided everything, but they supported one another. Her preservation letter required the HOA to retain emails, ballots, bids, invoices, work orders, legal advice, and communications with Northline. It also demanded that removals and penalties stop until the board produced its authority. Elaine responded before the deadline. She agreed that Northline would leave my mailbox alone during review. Work everywhere else, she wrote, would continue as scheduled. The next morning, orange safety cones appeared in front of Ruth's house. Northline returned to Juniper Ridge the following Monday, with 2 crews and a revised worksheet. My address was boxed in red and marked hold. Every other address remained active. By 9 o'clock, augers and steel were moving down Juniper Lane. On my way to a repair job, I counted 5 cedar posts laid across lawns, like discarded fence rails. Some owners had signed replacement forms. Others watched from their windows. At 11, Ruth called. Her mailbox was gone, and the new post was not ready. Northline had opened the hole, discovered an irrigation line, and left to get different fittings. A plastic tub covered the excavation, but there was nowhere for the carrier to leave Ruth's pharmacy package. I told my customer what had happened and left early. Ruth sat stiffly in my passenger seat as I drove her to the delivery office. She apologized twice for taking me from paid work. We waited 40 minutes while an employee found the package in a root bin. Before I left Ruth at home, she placed the pharmacy envelope on her kitchen counter and wrote the pickup mileage on the back of Elaine's notice. She had begun documenting her life the same way I documented repair work, dates, costs, and nothing exaggerated. I could not bill those hours. It was a small loss beside the contract, but it showed what the board's schedule reduced to a line item, an elderly woman arranging her day around medicine that should have reached her curb. Over 4 days, crews removed or disturbed 37 installations, several replacements leaned, and 3 lots had exposed irrigation damage. On one street, mail was held while the carrier waited for safe placement. With each owner's permission, I photographed the damage and told everyone to save receipts. Elaine emailed the community that one resident's legal objections had caused avoidable disruption and increased contractor expense. She did not name me. She did not need to. One neighbor accused me of protecting an ugly homemade box at everyone's expense. Another asked whether I would pay Northline's delay fee. That evening, I drafted a reply accusing Elaine of lying about the vote and Victor of steering money toward his family. Susan read it over my shoulder. "If you send that, they'll remember the anger and forget the records," she said. I deleted it. The message I finally posted asked residents to preserve photographs, delivery notices, invoices, and receipts. I stated that Maya had requested the voting records and vendor file, and I promised to share verified documents when we received them. It was less satisfying than the first version. It was also harder for Elaine to use against me. Susan asked whether proving the board wrong was worth becoming isolated from people we had known since Hannah rode a bicycle around the original loop. I had no clean answer. I said I was trying to stop the damage without splitting the neighborhood permanently. Neither of us pretended I had succeeded. The first break came from 2 directors who had voted against the project. Neither wanted to be identified publicly. Each provided portions of the pre-vote board packets. Maya found references to 3 bids, but only Northline's proposal was attached. The competing quotes and Victor's detailed conflict disclosure were absent. The disclosure stated that Victor's spouse owned a 20% non-managing interest in Northline Streetscape. That interest did not prove the company was unqualified or that its price was inflated. It did mean Victor had participated in vendor discussions and voted for the contract, while a disclosed household financial connection existed. The minutes recorded no recusal and no independent review. Leon's invoice carried the same vendor number used in the disclosure. Maya requested the full bid file and communications among Elaine, Victor, and Northline. The HOA produced only a summary sheet and called the rest privileged or unavailable. Then one director forwarded an older email chain. Elaine had pushed for the project before a group of developer-held homes went on sale. She believed rows of mismatched and weathered posts weakened the neighborhood's curb appeal, and a sales representative had encouraged visible improvements near the entrances. I could understand that concern. I repaired houses for a living. Neglected details could affect how buyers judged an entire property. But the emails also showed Elaine pressing to begin before the next membership meeting because a vote would invite design arguments and delay the sales window. She treated consent as an obstacle to the result she considered best. Victor replied that Northline could mobilize quickly if the board approved the full schedule. Maya added the chain to our preservation file. The motive made Elaine more understandable, not less responsible. She wanted the neighborhood to present well. To achieve it quickly, the board had concealed uncertainty, bypassed a required vote, and sent equipment onto private fixtures before resolving the first phase agreement. Late Friday, Leon called me from the curb. Northline had received another revised instruction authorizing crews to finish every open site and continue removals wherever an owner had not obtained an individual legal hold. A truck idled behind him with fresh concrete and 6 more black posts. Across the road, Ruth's replacement still leaned beneath a temporary delivery notice. I photographed the revised instruction and sent it to Maya. She was already at her office assembling an emergency civil filing to preserve every remaining mailbox, not only mine. Maya filed the complaint the following Monday on behalf of me, Ruth, and several other affected owners. It asked for declaratory and injunctive relief, but it did not ask the court to decide the entire dispute from the first stack of papers. The immediate request was narrower: preserve the remaining fixtures, stop penalties and collections, and prevent the HOA from spending disputed assessment money until the governing documents could be examined. The HOA's response emphasized delay. Its attorney argued that Northline had reserved crews and materials, that unfinished holes created risks, and that suspending the project could trigger cancellation charges. Maya did not deny those practical concerns. She showed that 37 sites had already been disturbed, then separated safe temporary repairs from further forced replacements. After a short hearing, the court entered a limited preservation order. Northline could secure open excavations and repair immediate hazards, but it could not remove additional mailboxes. The HOA could not add penalties, pursue collection of the $685 charges, or disperse the disputed funds while the case proceeded. The judge made clear that the order was not a final decision about ownership, the agreement, or the project's ultimate validity. That distinction mattered. No one walked out declared victorious. We walked out with time, and an obligation to use it carefully. Document exchange began with the complete Northline contract, bid communications, board distribution records, and internal emails. The contract included a price revision made after private discussions involving Victor. Northline's initial figure had risen when the scope changed from voluntary replacements near the entrances to mandatory work at all 214 homes. There was still no complete competitive bid file showing that the revised scope had been offered to other vendors. The most damaging document was not the original agreement. It was an older memorandum from counsel who had reviewed the Phase 1 records 2 years before Elaine's project. The memo warned that the board should obtain written consent from affected owners or formally address the recorded agreement before attempting mandatory replacements. It also recommended confirming the assessment procedure under the bylaws. Elaine had not destroyed the memo or denied receiving it. Instead, she had circulated only its first-page summary to the full board. That page described the association's general architectural powers, but omitted the detailed cautions about consent and member approval. Her emails showed that she believed the restated declaration had superseded the old exhibit. They also showed she knew a lawyer had advised against proceeding on that assumption alone. 2 directors who had opposed the contract stopped communicating privately and requested independent counsel for the association in an open meeting. Residents who had criticized me began asking why the full memorandum and vendor disclosure had not been included in the board packet. Elaine continued defending the design goal, but the board was no longer speaking with one voice. The pressure inside my house moved in the opposite direction. Our water heater had begun leaving rust-colored drops beneath the relief valve. Susan and I had planned to replace it before winter, but the next legal invoice consumed the money we had set aside. I installed a temporary catch pan and checked it every morning before work. Hannah noticed the pan during a visit. She asked whether keeping every homeowner in the case was worth postponing repairs in the house Susan and I actually lived in. "You stopped them at your mailbox," she said. "You could still take the exemption." She was not being selfish. She had watched me answer messages during dinner, lose repair appointments, and wake before dawn to organize receipts. Maya had received a settlement proposal protecting my property and waiving my charge if I released my claims. For one evening, I left the offer beside the blue closing binder and imagined signing it. The next morning, Ruth brought over her expense folder. Inside were fuel receipts, the mileage note, a pharmacy pickup record, and the supermarket circular she had used to carry the assessment notice. Her grocery totals had dropped during the week she paid the $685 charge. 36 other damaged sites had owners with their own smaller versions of the same disruption. I told Maya to reject the individual exemption and pursue a remedy that addressed the charges and restoration together. I did not pretend the choice was painless or heroic. It meant more fees, more delayed work at home, and no guaranteed result. Susan asked me to set one boundary in return, 2 evenings each week with no case files on the dining table. I agreed. That small rule did not reduce the cost, but it gave Susan back 2 quiet dinners and reminded me that protecting a neighborhood could not require neglecting my own family every night of the week. Discovery closed the gaps between the evidence tracks. The recorded agreement supported the consent rights of the first 18 properties. The absent membership vote challenged the assessment imposed on all 214 homes. The legal memorandum showed prior warning. The contract and emails raised procurement and disclosure concerns. Photographs, pharmacy records, and receipts documented actual harm rather than predicted inconvenience. Maya did not combine them into one dramatic accusation. She organized them into 4 hearing binders, each with an index and authenticated source. One held the recorded agreement and chain of declarations. One held bylaws, notices, minutes, and the missing voting records. One held the memorandum and board distribution history. The last held Northline's contract, bid revisions, conflict disclosure, photographs, and homeowner expenses. On the evening before the injunction hearing, she placed all 4 binders across her conference table. The yellow sticky tabs formed 4 straight rows. For the first time, the HOA would have to answer the complete record at once. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. There was no jury, no packed gallery, and no sudden speech that settled everything. Maya placed the 4 binders beside her legal pad. I carried the cedar mailbox agreement in a clear sleeve, with Hannah's carved star facing downward against the table. The HOA began with its strongest point. Its attorney argued that roadside mailboxes affected the appearance of every street, and therefore fell within the board's architectural authority. Uniform posts, he said, were a reasonable community standard. He also argued that even if the original agreement remained enforceable, it could protect only the 18 Phase 1 properties, not every later homeowner who had joined our case. Maya conceded the second point. The recorded exhibit did not create contract rights for people who had never been parties to it. That concession quieted the room because it removed the easiest accusation that we were stretching one document across the whole subdivision. She then separated the case into 2 layers. For the first 18 properties, the agreement had been signed by the developer, the original HOA, and the owners, recorded with matching descriptions, cross-referenced in the early deeds, and never formally terminated. The later declaration gave the board design review authority, but nothing in the record clearly converted those privately maintained fixtures into association property or erased the consent clause. For all 214 homes, Maya turned to the bylaws. The project's cost exceeded the threshold for a board-only expenditure, yet the HOA could produce no membership ballot, proxy count, or 2/3 approval. The board had approved the contract 3-2 and then charged every owner $685. Architectural authority, Maya argued, did not eliminate a separate voting requirement for the money used to exercise it. Leon testified next. He did not attack Northline or apologize for accepting the work. He confirmed that the company had received a master schedule for all 214 addresses and had been instructed to remove non-standard units even when owners objected, unless a specific address appeared on a legal hold list. When shown my original agreement, he had stopped because the document created a property question his crew was not authorized to decide. The 2 dissenting directors authenticated the incomplete meeting packets. Victor acknowledged that his spouse held the disclosed 20% interest in Northline and that he had participated in project discussions and voted for the contract. He described the interest as non-managing and denied receiving a direct personal payment. Maya did not claim otherwise. She established that the connection existed, that no recusal appeared in the minutes, and that no independent review of the revised bid was documented. Elaine testified last. She looked more tired than she had beside the excavator. She explained that developer-held homes were entering the market, and that she believed a consistent streetscape would protect values for every resident. I believed that part. I had seen buyers judge good houses by neglected trim and crooked fixtures. Then Maya showed her the older legal memorandum. Elaine admitted receiving it and circulating only the summary page. She said she believed the restated declaration had already resolved the conflict. When Maya asked why the detailed warnings were not given to the other directors, Elaine paused before answering that the board needed to act within the sales window. I touched the edge of the clear sleeve before I testified. The small star beneath the paper had no legal weight, and I never suggested otherwise. It reminded me only that the fixture being discussed as a design unit had been part of ordinary family life for 23 years. That helped me answer without turning the hearing into a personal grievance. Ruth did the same in her own way. She described the held medication package, the trip to the delivery office, and her recorded expenses. She did not ask the court to punish Elaine or replace every mailbox. She asked for reliable delivery, reimbursement, and the right not to be charged for unfinished work she had never approved. At the end of the hearing, the court maintained the injunction. The judge stated that the owners had presented substantial documentary support for their contract and governing document claims, while emphasizing that the order did not decide every issue or award final damages. The comments made clear that the HOA faced serious risk if it continued defending the assessment and vendor process unchanged. The parties entered structured mediation 2 weeks later. The first proposal would have restored only the Phase 1 fixtures, while leaving later owners responsible for most of the project cost. Maya rejected it because the missing membership vote affected the community-wide assessment independently of the original agreement. Negotiations lasted through the afternoon. I saw Elaine alone near the conference room window, rubbing the indentation her reading glasses had left across her nose. For the first time, I understood that she had convinced herself speed was a form of leadership. That recognition did not excuse the missing vote, the withheld memo, or the damage. It did keep me from wanting a settlement designed to humiliate her. The final terms addressed each evidence track. All 214 charges of 685, 146,590 in total, would be reversed or refunded. The Northline contract would be canceled. The 37 disturbed sites would be restored or completed according to each owner's choice, with no additional charge. Documented delivery, transportation, and repair expenses would be reimbursed. The settlement did not award punitive damages or pretend every inconvenience carried the same value. Homeowners submitted receipts, delivery records, photographs, and repair estimates for review. Restoration payments went directly toward the damaged sites, while refunds returned money owners had already paid. Maya explained each category before anyone signed. I appreciated that restraint. A larger headline number might have felt satisfying for one afternoon, but an unsupported demand could have delayed the repairs Ruth needed and shifted unnecessary expense back onto the same neighbors we were trying to protect. The settlement recognized the recorded agreement for the 18 Phase 1 properties. Any future community-wide mailbox program would require the membership approval specified in the governing documents, plus individual consent wherever the recorded agreement applied. The HOA also had to adopt procedures for conflict review and disclosure of complete decision materials. Some owners chose restoration of their original posts. Others wanted Northline to finish the black replacements. I supported both choices. Forcing everyone back to cedar would have repeated the same mistake in reverse and wasted usable materials. When we signed, Ruth asked Maya whether regular delivery could resume before reimbursement checks were processed. That was the only deadline she cared about. A week later, a Northline truck turned slowly onto Juniper Lane again. This time, its work order did not say remove. It listed 37 addresses beneath the word restore. Restoration took 3 weeks. Northline reset leaning posts, repaired irrigation lines, and replaced broken concrete under each owner's written choice. Maya required completion receipts before any site was marked closed. Refunds and account credits followed, including the $685 Ruth had taken from her monthly budget. Her regular pharmacy delivery resumed before the first reimbursement check arrived. One afternoon, I opened my mailbox and found a handwritten card from her beneath the envelopes. She thanked me for the rides and the paperwork, then added that she was happiest about no longer planning her medication around a trip across town. I kept the card in the blue closing binder. Hannah helped me clean the cedar post on a Saturday morning. We sanded away the scrape left by the excavator bucket and applied fresh sealant. When she reached beneath the shelf, she found the crooked star and traced one point with her thumb. "The wood grain still did it," she said. I let her keep that version of the story. The leadership changes happened through meetings rather than spectacle. Elaine resigned as president but remained in Juniper Ridge. Victor was removed as treasurer after a membership vote. The new board created an online portal for contracts, meeting records, conflict disclosures, and notices. It also adopted the review procedures required by the settlement. The portal was not exciting, but it changed the rhythm of community meetings. Residents could read proposals before arriving, ask questions about costs, and see whether a director had disclosed a connection. The first posted contract concerned routine landscaping near the entrance. 3 people attended the meeting with printed questions instead of rumors from the neighborhood email chain. Susan noticed that I answered none of them. For once, the records were available without my dining table becoming a document station, and I went home early enough to help her choose a replacement water heater. At the next open meeting, Elaine sat 2 rows behind me. I greeted her when she arrived. She nodded and took her seat. I did not congratulate myself, and she did not ask me to excuse what she had done. We managed the smaller, harder courtesy of continuing to live in the same neighborhood. A voluntary design committee later offered several mailbox styles instead of one mandatory model. Some owners kept cedar, brick, or painted metal posts. Others chose the black Northline design because they genuinely liked it. Without the charge and thread attached, the same post no longer looked like a symbol of control. I placed the certified recorded agreement in a fireproof box and gave Hannah the indexed digital copy she had helped create. The paper had mattered, but not because it possessed some magic sentence that defeated the HOA. It mattered because Leon paused long enough to read it, Maya authenticated it, neighbors preserved their records, and the remaining documents showed where the board's authority ended. By autumn, Juniper Lane no longer looked perfectly uniform. My restored cedar mailbox still stood between 2 new black posts, all 3 straight, serviceable, and receiving mail. Hannah's star remained underneath, invisible from the road. That was fine with me. The point was never that everyone should see what made my mailbox different. The point was that each owner had been allowed to decide what stood beside the road.